I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 43. They caught it on a routine mammogram, so they caught it pretty early. So my advice regarding breast cancer, get your mammograms. Some places they don't start them till 45. I'm really glad they started mine at 40 because it would have been 2 more years and the cancer would have been much more advanced and might have killed me if I'd waited till 45. I know they're a pain, they're annoying, they hurt a little bit. Do it anyway. And I say this as someone who is due for a colonoscopy and I have been avoiding it, but I'm going to do it.
Welcome again. This is Martin, your host for the Immigrant Nation podcast. And this very beautiful day, we are lucky and blessed to have the very Marianne Mohanraj. We are thrilled to welcome Marianne, a truly remarkable guest to the Immigrant Nations podcast. Ms. Mohanraj has a rich and diverse career in academia, having taught at institutions like Salt Lake Community College, the University of Utah, Vermont College, and currently at the University of Illinois at Chicago. She's also been a visiting professor at Roosevelt University and Northwest University. Ms. Mohanraj novels is plenty of stories diversifying in different areas, bodied in motion, and has received an honorable mention from the Asian American Literacy Award and was named a US Today Notable Book. In addition to her academia accomplishments, Ms. Mohanraj has made significant contributions to literature and the arts. She founded the Speculative Literature Foundation and the biannual Critic Festival celebrating South Asian and diaspora literature. Her writing often delves into cultural identity, and she is a passionate sexuality activist. Ms. Mohanraj's personal journey is equally inspiring. She has documented her battle with breast cancer and continues to serve her community, recently being elected to the D200 School Board. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Marianne Mohanraj to the Immigrant Nation podcast. Ms. Marianne, what say you?
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Martin. I appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here.
Of course, you are welcome. So while we were researching you and reading plenty about you online, what I found out was you have a very interesting immigrant journey. So you were born in Sri Lanka, and your parents migrated with you to the U.S. when you were little. Um, Tell us how Black July affected the trajectory of your life, given the fact that there's millions of immigrants across the globe that are struggling with the same situation. Example is the Israeli war with Palestinian, the Russian invasion over in Eastern Europe, and on and on and on, not mentioning the many wars and battles going across the globe that are forcing people to migrate. Tell us about how Black July affected the trajectory of your life and how it has shaped who you are today.
Sure. Um, so, just to give people some context, right? I was born in Sri Lanka in 71 and came to the US when I was 2.5. So I've now lived in the US for 50 years. I'm 53 now, almost 53. and um, and when I was 12 years old, my parents were planning to send me back to Sri Lanka to spend a summer with my grandparents. And we'd been back every 3 or 4 years. We would have gone more often, but flights were expensive. My dad's a doctor and he was working, but we lived in a tiny apartment and we're just, they had to really save up to be able to go. So we went, I think, twice when I was little, and then I was supposed to go alone. But my dad got a telegram saying, don't send her, there's trouble coming. So they actually didn't put me on the plane. And as it turned out, Black July is this period in 1983 when violence broke out in the capital city of Colombo. And there is dispute about how many people were killed, but I think pretty clearly some thousands of people were killed. Um, there are two majority ethnic groups. There's the Sinhalese, which is about 70% of the population, the Tamils, which are close to 30% of the population, and there are some also smaller groups there. And this violence was against the minority Tamil population, of which my family is a member. Um, and it's coming to some extent out of colonial history. Sri Lanka was colonized by the Dutch, the Portuguese, and the British. And the British, in particular, kind of favored the Tamils because they were familiar with them from colonizing them in India, and I think is probably a part of it. And they also had a divide and conquer sort of approach to colonization, which was very effective, where they elevated one group and then that led to conflict with the other groups. So we gained independence in 48, a year after India did, but there were these sort of deep fissures in the society that led to various kinds of violence. And it gets complicated with the LTTE, which you may know as the Tamil Tigers, and so on.
We absolutely love the historical background. And just for those who are left behind on what for those who are left behind on what you received, what did your dad receive?
A
A
telegram. A
telegram,
telegram.
yes.
This is,
For those who do
yeah,
not
this.
know what a telegram is, it's today's email.
Yeah. In the days before the internet.
Yes,
So,
yes.
and telegram was a big deal. Like usually they would write to each other. He would write to his family on these very thin onion skin letters that, the paper was so thin so that you could write a lot and have it not cost too much in postage going on a slow boat across the ocean, right? So it was very hard when you immigrated back then. You were in very limited contact with your family. If I'm remembering right, my grandparents' village, they didn't have a telephone. Only the big man's house in the village had a telephone back then. And if you got an international call, it would go to him and they might send a runner to come get you. So we didn't really call. It was letters and then it was telegram. Anyway, side note. And so what happened with Black July, I didn't go. I wasn't caught up in the violence. The violence was terrible. If you look up Sri Lanka Black July, you will find very graphic photos of things like Sinhalese people putting tires around the neck of Tamil people and lighting them on fire. I mean, it's very brutal photos from that time. They had voter registration lists, so they knew who was Tamil and who was Sinhalese, and so there was clearly some government involvement, some complicity for them to have access to those lists. It was a very hard time, and it sort of sparked more violence and in a variety of ways led to my grandmother's house was firebombed. And so in the end, it didn't necessarily affect me so directly. I was pretty safe in Connecticut, going to 7th grade, in my local Catholic school. But various of my relatives fled as refugees, and mostly my mother's family. My mom is the oldest of 9, and so she had many siblings. One of them was in Chicago at that point, but the rest of them were all still in Sri Lanka, along with her parents. And they fled the country and went to Canada initially because Canada had much more open immigration policies. And then over the years that followed, my parents worked to sponsor them into the US. One of my aunts ended up staying in Canada, settling there, but the rest of them all came to the US eventually.
Very interesting. So you've always had a fascination, if I may. you've always had a fascination with, if I may, sexuality. Um, when you're working on bodies in motion, how did sexuality play out in the writing, and how has it developed over time based on your history and your work?
I think my parents, when they came, their image of Sri Lanka kind of froze in their minds, right? And so when they were raising us in Connecticut, and they always planned to go back, it's just that over time, the kids are in school, you get settled in the community, that dream of going back goes further and further away. They thought they'd come here, get rich, and then go back, right? And then, of course, the conflict broke out, and so it was no longer safe to go back. But I'm not sure they would have anyway. But they tried to preserve their culture, and so they had very strict rules for their three daughters. So I wasn't allowed to date. Certainly, I wasn't allowed to go to school dances or have sleepovers at girlfriends' houses. They had had an arranged marriage. They expected that everyone in my family had up until that point, so they expected that I would as well. And it was a real source of conflict, when I was a teenager and wanting to maybe date a little bit, and that was just completely not an option. And so I snuck around when I was 16 and 17, and then I applied to colleges, none of them in the same state as my parents. And then when I went to college, I did start dating and kept my first boyfriend a secret from them, which was terrifying, because the threat was always that if they found me doing anything, they were going to pull me out of school and send me to a convent school in Sri Lanka, like the all-girls school that my mother went to. And
That's a pretty
but with
cool.
my
That's a pretty cool threat.
well,
I,
it happened to people I knew. I knew girls who were sent back to India, actually, and ended up marrying people who were born and raised in America, even, but who ended up being sent back for arranged marriages. So, and who went and married them. So it was a very real threat. They didn't follow up on it. With my second boyfriend, I told them about it. We then had months of screaming fights, and so I guess the reason I'm talking about this is that I think as a writer, we tend to write about the conflict in our lives, right? That's where the stories are. That's where the sort of interest is, and maybe we're trying to work some things out too as we're writing these stories. So in my 20s, I wrote mostly erotica. This is actually before Bodies in Motion. I wrote Torn Shapes of Desire and Silence in the Word were two collections of erotic fiction and poetry. I edited Aqua Erotica for Random House, which was a waterproof erotica book that sold really well. That's probably my best-selling book, I think. And the book itself was waterproof. You could hold it under a tap, and it had this special paper, and all the stories were water themed. And part of that was also because it was partly because of the conflict with my parents, and also because when I started college, freshman year, in fall semester, 4 different women came to me and told me about date rape situations, and it seemed to me that this would have been 1989, that we were terrible at talking about sex back then. We just mostly didn't in public. I don't know if the young people can kind of imagine it today, right? No internet, no access to anything. If you wanted to read an adult story, you kind of had to go to a men's sex store to get that kind of fiction. If you went to like your local Borders, Barnes & Noble, there was almost nothing on the shelves. That started to change in the early 90s with the Best American Erotica series by Susie Bright and the Erotica series by Down There Press. So it was a real awakening. But I ended up spending my 20s mostly writing about sex because it felt like a lot of damage was being done by the silence around it. And that men and women were really bad at talking to each other about consent and about what they actually wanted. They had very few healthy models for it. So, and I think that's still a problem today. It's maybe a little better, I hope, but still pretty bad. So I wrote that in my 20s, and so when I went to grad school, I did my master's in my mid 20s, and then when I was 30, I started a PhD, and that was Bodies in Motion was my dissertation project. It was a creative writing PhD. So you do the same lit classes and exams as the lit English grad students, but then instead of writing a critical dissertation, you write a creative one. And so I wrote this book of immigrant stories, and there's actually, I wouldn't say the book's erotica. The second story in the book, 7 Cups of Water, has been published both as erotica and mainstream lit, and it's pretty sexy. And so, and there's, probably a few other sexy moments in the book. Mostly it's mother-daughter stories. I was writing the book and kind of trying to think about secrets, and how we don't talk about this stuff generationally. And I was thinking about how did the girls who are rebelling against their parents and frustrated by all the restrictions on their lives turn into the mothers who are now worried about their daughters and worried that their lives will be ruined by their sexual choices, and then eventually they become the grandmothers. And what is the grandmother's perspective on all of this at that point? And so that's what I was trying to explore in that book. So anyway, I'm sorry, you give me a short question and I give you a really long answer.
You know what? There's a reason we have you here, right? Is so that
Okay.
you talk about your experiences and not my experiences, and that's pretty cool. So I'm just curious, right? Having lived a very, and correct me if my assumption is wrong, but having lived a very sexually depraved early life, so teen years, early 20s, if I may, what gave you the authority or audacity to speak to women's sexuality?
So I wouldn't say sexually depraved. I might say sexually adventurous. In my 20s,
Like your choice of
depraved is
words.
kind of a value judgment that I might not agree with. I might say many people live a very sexually constrained life, or a frustrated life, or one that involves a lot of cheating, which I don't do. So, so I guess I would say I didn't start really dating until college. And I had, 3 partners in college, three boyfriends. So not so adventurous at that point. I did realize I was bi. I dated a few girls here and there. I guess, when I was writing, I was initially mostly just writing things that I knew about. Like the first story I wrote that had any sexuality in it was this story called Season of Marriage. And it was about a girl who went to India for an arranged marriage. And I was writing it thinking about this friend of mine that this had happened to. And it's a very sweet little story where she goes there, she's scared, she meets the guy, she actually likes him, and they have a really nice wedding night. And I kind of meant it as almost like a wish sent into the universe for her. Like, I hope it all works out. I hope that this is good. It was published in an early online magazine, Monsoon magazine maybe. And I got hate mail from men in India who were very angry that one of their women was writing explicitly about sex. So I think there was and I was surprised, right? That because to me this was a very sweet story. So I think there was a part of it is just, I grew up in America, and I grew up with a different set of cultural mores than they did. Part of it was that if you ask like what gave me the confidence to write this stuff and put it out in the world, when I first did it, I didn't expect anyone I knew would read it. So I was on the internet in the very, very early days. I was on news groups. This was before the web. And I had stumbled across these erotica news groups, Rec Arts Erotica and Alt Sex Stories, where people were sharing these explicit stories. And it was actually the first time I'd read not great writing. Everything I'd read up until that point had been published and been through editors, and this was just raw stuff that people were writing and putting out. And I read it and I thought, oh, I can do better than that. I can spell, my grammar is pretty good, so I can write a coherent story. And so I wrote one, I put it up, just 1,000 words, and people loved it and sent me all kinds of praise. So then I wrote like 20 more and I put them up. And I used my own name. Again, I was the only English major at the University of Chicago back then who was using her email. And I only knew about it because we were all assigned an email, but nobody knew about it. I only did because I was dating, my second boyfriend was a tech guy, and he showed me how to use it. And he got me onto the news groups. So I got outed. My parents got a call from an uncle in England and said, do you know what your daughter is putting on the internet? And they said, what's the internet? And because they had no idea, nobody had heard of it, right? If you were not in like techie circles, or I suppose military circles, probably knew about it too. And then they found out, and then they called me, and there was more screaming. I think by that point I was, they knew about Paul, who I was dating, so I was a little bit used to their being furious with me. And I guess part of it is the rules when I was growing up were so much stricter for me than for everyone around me that it kind of made it easy for me to question them, right? I would see that my parents were laying down all of these laws, but all of my American friends could go to a school dance without consequence, right? Could date a little bit. And so I don't know. I don't want. When I talk to my dad about this, I'd be like, "Well, you were so strict," and he was like, "Oh, you're saying it's because I'm so strict? We're so strict that you ended up so wild?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, maybe. I'm not sure." So,
is there truth in that theory though, that you rebelled because they were a little bit hard on what your expectation was?
I think rebel is such an interesting way to think about it, right? I think that's definitely the way they saw it, as rebelliousness, rebelling. From my point of view, I was 18, I was an adult, and it was time to make my own decisions. And it wasn't really my parents' choice anymore, what I did. Yeah, culture, obviously. I mean, my parents, married the people that their parents picked out for them, right? So they were used to a very different framework. And, I have 2 children. My daughter is 17 and a junior in high school. My son is 14, about to start high school. And my daughter now, we are navigating this last year that she's living with us, and as she transitions into adulthood. And there are definitely times when my husband and I kind of want to lay down the law, and we have to pause and think, in a year, she's going to be making these decisions in another city on her own. If we tell her now, you can't have a birthday beach party that goes till midnight, it's more important that we preserve our relationship so that if she does get into trouble, she feels like she can call us, right? But we did say, please, do not get in the car with anyone who's been drinking coming home from that party, right? So that's where we are right now. So I have a lot of sympathy for my parents. They came so far. They came from a village in Sri Lanka. Everyone had had an arranged marriage. My mother only they went to single sex schools. They had, a very set pattern for their lives. And they also knew that, like, if you strayed from that pattern back in Sri Lanka, there was a good chance the girl would get pregnant, she'd get kicked out, the boy wouldn't marry her, her life might well be ruined, right? And they didn't have easy access to birth control back then, right? So the cultural strictures that led to them being so strict, in a lot of ways, I would say, made sense for the time and place. The hard thing was the transition to here, where the culture was already different and the rules were changing, because, I would actually say birth control and DNA testing, right? Because in America, if a girl gets pregnant, you can find out who the father is and you can make him pay child support. So it's not as likely to financially ruin her life as it would have been in Sri Lanka even 10 years earlier, right? So
Very interesting how
that's it. That's
cultures play into who we are today. And so the beauty of this show is that we're speaking to different cultures across the globe that proliferate in one area, either in America or in Europe or in Dubai or whatever it is that people are migrating to, right? And where we migrate, people have their own cultures, and where we're coming from, we're bringing with us our own cultures, and in there's value, but there's also a lot of conflict. For most parents that have children that are migrating into other countries, we still want to hold on to our cultural values because we think there's a certain degree of value in them, because from where we came from, we've seen them work. And for parents who've migrated, the struggle is telling the difference between where you're coming from and where you are now, and having that fine line to allow your kids to thrive in that new community, because in reality, this is what their life is going to look like.
Yeah.
I, as a parent, when my daughter got to that place, I kind of struggled a little bit, because I had this thing that, hey, I do not want her to go out and make the same mistakes that girls make, and at the same time, I had to be flexible enough so that she can learn to trust her own decision making process, right? When parents get to that point, how much of a loose string should they allow their children to have, and how much should they hold back and enforce those cultural values that are so important to them, knowing that, for example, from the background of your historical culture. So for Indians, Sri Lankans, Pakistanis, we know that you have plenty of arranged marriages, and data says that those marriages work. um what do you
Well,
say?
it's complicated. Data says that those marriages are as likely to stay together long term as love marriages. But you also have to keep in mind that in those cultures there's incredible pressure to stay together, right? So if your husband is beating you, there's going to be cultural pressure for you to stay married. And if you go to your parents and say, he's a drunk and he beats me every night, look at my bruises and broken bones, they might there was a good chance that they would say, well, stay with us till you're feeling better, and then you have to go back to him, right? And if he was really bad, maybe the uncles will show up and yell at him. But odds are, back in the day, and certainly within Catholicism, which my parents were Catholic, you couldn't get married, you couldn't get divorced. There's no divorce within Catholicism, right? So there was, once you were married, that was it. So it's hard to say that arranged marriages are as successful. I would be a little skeptical about that kind of claim without taking in cultural pressures to stay married. That's also true for love marriages, right? I mean, in more conservative areas where it may be a love marriage, but there is, you chose the guy, he turns out to be awful, but you're in a conservative area where there's a lot of pressure to stay married. I wouldn't say that says a lot about how healthy the marriage is, right? And how good it is for either one of you. So, I guess I cannot tell anyone how to raise their kids. I wouldn't dare try. Lord knows I've made plenty of mistakes in that regard. I think, you know, where we are right now is, um, I think parents, we say we want our kids to be happy, but as it turns out, on a fundamental level, we're terrified and we want them to be safe, right? And I think that starts when they're babies and you're like, what if they stop sleeping in the middle of the night? And you get up and you go check on them to make sure they're still alive. And then when they're toddlers and they are trying to throw themselves down flights of stairs all the time and run into traffic and everything else, right? So you have years when they're little of being your nervous system kind of being conditioned to like, oh my God, this child is trying to kill itself. I have to be constantly watchful in keeping them safe. And at some point, you have to learn to let them cross the street without holding your hand. And I remember that moment, like, I'm going to let go of their hand and let them cross the street. And it was so scary, right? And at some point, they're going to be like, I just want to walk home from school. And you'll be like, okay, they're old enough. They know the way. Thank God we have cell phones now, you know? Okay, I guess you're old enough to do that. And I think parenting is, on the one hand, trying to empower the children and hope that they'll make good choices. And on the other hand, also, and I really have a hard time with this, but they're going to make mistakes. They're going to get hurt. They're going to probably have bad relationships with people who don't treat them well, but are attractive and maybe have motorcycles, right? And you're going to be, I used to say, like, what if my daughter starts dating a young Republican? What are we going to do? But
That cannot be the most evil thing, is it?
it's a little terrifying to me, someone whose political views might end up with them supporting someone who would get me or people I love killed. That's pretty scary. So I'm not talking about all conservatives. I'm talking about a certain percentage of the party. Yeah, the most reactionary right-wing people. But the I guess my I don't know. When something happens and your kid is hurt, you feel horrible. Even if it's something like I wasn't watching her closely enough when she was 7 years old at an Easter party and they were playing baseball and someone swung his baseball bat and hit her right next to her eye really hard with the baseball bat, and her face swelled up and it looked terrifying, and we rushed her to the emergency room, right? And as a parent, you're gonna feel horrible. She was fine in the long run, had a very nice shiner for a couple of days, but I don't know. Terrible things happen, and you just try and make them strong enough to cope with it, I guess. Help them be strong enough to cope with it, and hope that they trust you enough to call when they need.
Yes, of course. So you've taught at numerous institutions, including Salt Lake City Community College, the University of Utah, and currently at the University of Illinois at Chicago. How has your teaching philosophy evolved over the years, and what do you find most rewarding about teaching literature and writing, and has sexuality played a role in that?
Occasionally, sexuality plays a role. It depends on what course I'm teaching. If I occasionally teach feminist theory or queer studies, and sometimes even with the general lit classes, we'll be dealing with a story that's dealing with rarely sexuality, more like gender issues, right? Gender politics, that kind of thing comes up a lot. In terms of, and I guess in creative writing classes, occasionally my students will write slightly explicit material, but mostly I think they're too nervous to do that.
But that's the idea of teaching. So when you feel like your students are gonna be holding back, what confidence are you embodying them so that they can be able to fully express themselves?
I teach a separate workshop on writing sexuality, right? So I don't like that's something that people can sign up for. I don't really necessarily want to push someone into doing that if that's not an interest of theirs, right? There's plenty of other stuff to write about. If the main thing that is a driving force in your life is grief over a dying parent, you should write about that, right? That should be what you focus on if you want to write about it, right? Or if there's a conflict in your homeland. And one of the best novels I've read recently is by another Sri Lankan writer, Sugi Ganeshananthan. It's called Brotherless Night, and it is a brilliant, heartbreaking book about the conflict in Sri Lanka. And so, and there's I don't think there's any sex in there. So, right. So you don't need to. If people want to do that, there's lots of ways to get more empowered about it. And I have a workshop that I teach every once in a while that gives people some tools. I think my teaching philosophy, I guess how it's evolved is when I first started, I did more correction, right? Like I would redline the papers with lots of like grammar mistakes, spelling, whatever, you'd come back all marked up. But then in grad school, I read some theory that talked about, they'd researched this, right? And they found one, if you use a red pen, students don't learn as much because they're so conditioned to see that as criticism, they kind of shut down. So that was really interesting to me, that literally the color of the pen made a difference. And some other essays I read kind of led me to thinking, well, I guess, and also my publishing experience. Like, so when you write a story, right, or you write a novel, it goes through, in traditional publishing, various stages of development. So there's the workshopping phase where you're showing it to people and figuring it out. You get it to a point where you're like, I think this is pretty good. Maybe you sell it to somebody. There's then the developmental editing phase where the editor helps you hone this, here you've got a pretty solid rock of a story, and they help you cut it away, facet it, and turn it into a shining gem, right? So there may be a lot of cutting and pasting and chopping. And then after that is line editing, copy editing, proofreading. There's all of these steps. And what I found with my students is that if I marked up their papers, they would, which is something you would, marking spelling mistakes and so on, that's like the copy editing, proofreading point, right? And if you do that before the developmental editing, it actually gets in the way, right? So the students would take this paper and, we'd say like, okay, revisions, here's your draft. I've given it back to you. Now you're going to do revisions and hand it in. Or I actually have a policy that if you get less than a B on one of my papers, but once you've handed it in, you have 1 week you have to meet with me and talk about, what needs to be fixed, but you have a week to revise, and then I will, if you hand it in, then I'll regrade it as if it was new. So, this is, that's my, I really emphasize the revision process. You don't have to be brilliant, like right out the gate, right? Like it's a process. But what I found was that when I marked up the papers, students were less willing to revise. They would go in and they would correct everything that I had marked, but they wouldn't make major changes. They wouldn't say like, oh, this whole section should go, or I need to expand it. Or, I'm like, I didn't argue this convincingly. Maybe I need to change my whole thesis to something different, right? Like maybe there isn't actually enough proof to support what I want to say. And so I actually don't mark up papers basically at all anymore because I think it's counterproductive. And instead I look for what's the main thing I want them to work on in the revision, and then maybe like 2 smaller things, and that's all I write at the end of the paper. And if they can do that, they're going to get a good grade from me, right? Like that's because it's not trying to get them all the way to a publishable, brilliant thing. I just want to see progress. I want to see them that they've learned something, that they've figured something out, that this version of the paper is stronger than the last version.
Ver-
Anyway, I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Very
So,
interesting. So, since we're talking about writing, let's stay there for a moment. I think this will be very interesting for most immigrants to learn. So, please walk us through what does the process of writing a paper and developing it into a book look like, and how would immigrants who are thinking about writing a book publish in today's world?
so I'm a little bit of a traditionalist here. Um, I'd have some questions if someone came to me and said, I want to write and publish something. I'd ask them, what are your goals, right? If your goal is to become rich and famous, I would warn you that tiny percentage of writers manage to do that. So it's a little bit like, if you're an athlete and your goal is to become an Olympic athlete, understand that most athletes can be very good and not be Olympic athletes, right? And a lot of luck is involved. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, right? But
Right.
be realistic. If you want to be an actor, you go to Hollywood, understand most actors end up waiting tables most of their lives with a few parts, right? So just know what you're getting into. So that's one part of it. If your goal is to just tell your story, right, and have it be read by people, you can just do that, right? You can write your story, you can put it up on a blog, podcast, you can indie publish a book, and print copies and give it out to all of your friends and bring it to your church, etc. And people may even buy it, right? You'll probably have a pretty small audience. But it may be very satisfying. And that's what I would recommend for something like a family cookbook, right? Or your grandfather's memoir or something like that, right? Like where it's something that is going to be cherished by people in your local community, but maybe not necessarily have a broader audience, right? So I think that's super valuable, and I think telling the stories of our elders is incredibly valuable. So there are also oral history projects out there that you can find for different cultures and communities that give people another way to share their stories. So I want to acknowledge that. If your goal is to write well and learn how to do it well, you have to study. Right? It is the same as anything else. I mean, you can't sit down. I think it's really interesting. I think people get confused because they do write all the time. And so they feel like, oh, I should be able to sit down and write a book. And there's a truth to that. I often say to people, if you can tell a story in a bar and keep people entertained and they're laughing and they're clapping and so on, you probably can write that story. It's basically the same thing, right? But there's a set of skills to learn to translate it to writing. And then there's so many things to learn in terms of, whether it's pacing, characterization, point of view, voice. There's lots of skills involved. When I sit down to play the piano, I can play reasonably well, but it's because my parents made me go for 10 years of piano lessons. And at the end of it, I was practicing 2 hours a day and did lots of drills. And, so my fingers learned it. And if you want to be a good writer, I mean, you got to do the work. You have to read a lot, write a lot. And then I would say either take classes or find a community of writers. There's so many online. It's so much easier than it used to be. Like when I was young, you'd have to go to the library and look for a flyer posted up on the wall for someone starting a writing workshop, right? Or maybe your local bookstore.
Yeah.
But now you can just jump online and there's so many writing communities. And I would just put together a group of people. A typical writer's workshop is maybe 8 to 10 people. You can also share in larger groups, there's fan fiction sites like AO3 that are massive. And just share your work and get some feedback. And again, we're back to revision, learn how to make it better, right? If someone says to you, this part is boring, okay, to work on that. If they say, I didn't understand why the character was doing this here, there's something else to work on, right? You have to learn how to take criticism and incorporate it into your work. And then, assuming you do all that, you do the work, you get something, the people who read it say this is amazing, You then have a choice whether to attempt traditional publishing or indie publishing. And I think people get impatient, and that's why they do indie, because they're like, I did all this work, I want to just get it out there. And that's fine. But I would warn them that when you decide to indie publish, you're basically taking on 5 jobs at least. You are going to be not just the writer, you are now also the editor, you're the book designer, you're the copy editor, the proofreader, you're the publicist, and that's a huge important job. And that involves a lot of time and work. So if you are a hustle culture kind of person and you're like, yes, I will learn how to do all those things, and I'm going to put in the time, I'm going to set up my book tour, I'm going to get together with some friends and call libraries and bookstores, and we're going to road trip across the country and like publicize the book, or I'm going to do a blog tour and put it all out there's going to be a month, or I'm going to do a Kickstarter and I'm going to publicize it that way and get the word out there. All of those methods can work. But if you are the kind of person who's like, no, I just want to write my book, and I would say indie publishing, you're probably not going to find an audience, right? Because what will happen is you'll write the book, you'll upload it to Amazon, and nobody will see it, right? And it's really a discoverability problem at that point, and it's a huge problem that we're all having, especially with social media recently. Facebook, Instagram, which is I think owned by Facebook, et cetera, they're all kind of throttling. We used to have really good organic reach on social media, so you could get the word out about your project. And now things that I used to have 10,000 people see something I posted. Now Facebook is only showing it to 10 people, right? And so even though I still have the 10,000 followers. And so that's something we're all struggling with. So again, you can throw money at the problem. You can hire an editor. You can hire a publicist. Be careful. There are a lot of scam businesses out there that basically take aspiring writers' money and give them almost nothing in return. So if you're going that route, find your local writing organization. Like in science fiction fantasy, we have SFWA, the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers Association, and they will often have something that advises writers on this. There's a site called Writer Beware that lists scams, for example, right? Known scams, so that you can avoid handing someone $5,000 and getting nothing in return, which I've seen happen way too often. And generally, I think if you've put in all the work, it took me 4 years to write Bodies in Motion. You want to give it its best shot. You've made this beautiful book. It speaks some truths of your heart that you think are important, that you think will matter to other people. Then I would do the traditional publishing route, and it's a little tedious. There's, you find an agent, there's guides online for how you do that. Then the agent sends it out. The marketplace is competitive. It can be tough. But I would give it at least a year on traditional publishing, doing everything you're supposed to do before you decide to switch to indie. That's my recommendation. Bodies in Motion, I sold it in a 2-book deal to HarperCollins. They paid me $25,000 for that book and $60,000 for a book I hadn't written. I got a $25,000 advance on that second book, so $50,000 up front, which paid off my student loans and paid for a trip to Sri Lanka and a new computer and a leather writing chair and a red dress. Those were the things I bought with that money. Mostly the student loans. Yeah, and there have been some people who have had really good success indie publishing, but I will tell you, it's mostly people who write series fiction, like category romance, epic fantasy, that kind of thing, where people will kind of buy it and then buy the next one, and you price them cheaply, and people like race through your series and read 20 books that you've written. So if you want to go that route, there's a Facebook group, 20 books to 50K, that is sort of designed for people who write fast and writes mostly serious fiction, and the idea is their premise is if you can write 20 books, you can guarantee yourself an income of 50,000 a year from your writing. If you follow their guidelines, it's free to join, and there's a lot of good information in there, but it is also a lot of like number crunching. They will say like this is how much to spend on Facebook ads, and if you're not business minded, you should find a friend who is and partner with them. So if you're going to go that route. Let me say one more thing. If you're going traditional publishing, you don't pay anybody. Money flows to the writer in traditional publishing. Your agent takes 15% of what they make for you. You don't pay them anything. If they ask you for money, they're scammers and it's a bad agent. Okay, I just want to make sure people knew that. Okay, go on.
That's a beautiful caveat. So, my assessment of your work pulls me in a certain direction, and that's sexual activism. So, as a sexuality activist, you founded and moderated the Internet Erotica Writers Workshop and were a former moderator for soap.sexuality.general. How do you view the role of sexuality in literature, and why is it important to you to create spaces of these discussions?
This is so funny. I'll note I'm 52 now, right? So I mostly worked in sexuality in my 20s. In my 30s, I was mostly writing mainstream lit about families, immigrant fiction with not so much sex in them. In my 40s, I mostly was doing science fiction and fantasy, which sometimes had sex in it. So it's a little like long ago for me, where I was doing this most of the time. But I'll say, I guess why I think it's important to have these spaces is we're still struggling with these issues of consent. We're still seeing, Me Too kind of made clear that there's big public problems with men in power often, and the women who work for them, and the abuses that often occur. So there's a saying, right, that sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? So when you have something that's a little poisonous, exposing it to the light is the best way to heal it, right? And so to do that, we have to be able to talk about it. And from a literary point of view, I would say, if the purpose of writing is to explore the human condition, right, and to say this is who we are, this is what it means to be human, sex is just a huge part of that. It is for most people, it is going to be a big part of their lives in some way. And so it is, I think, mostly prudishness that has kept it from being a big part of literature up until this point. And that has really changed. With 50 Shades of Grey and people reading that book on the subway, I remember that was a radical cultural shift when that started happening, right? And now, if you're just looking at current market trends, there's like a new trend of romantasy, which is romance fiction crossed with fantasy is very big right now. And you read these stories and they are quite steamy. They are very adult. And I think romance has always had that, but maybe people weren't so aware that there was a lot of explicit sex scenes in romance. But if you've read Outlander, then you might know. So even back in the 80s, there's plenty of that going on. It was just, you had the bodice ripper covers, right, that signaled to the reader that there's going to be heaving breasts in this story.
Yeah.
So
Very interesting. So you've struggled with cancer, and walk us through what that journey looked like, and how immigrants who have family members or friends who are struggling with that, how they can best support them.
So I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 43. They caught it on a routine mammogram, so they caught it pretty early. So my first advice is regarding breast cancer: get your mammograms. When I think some places they don't start them till 45. I'm really glad they started mine at 40, because it would have been 2 more years and the cancer would have been much more advanced and might have killed me if I'd waited till 45. So I know their pain. they're annoying, they hurt a little bit, do it anyway. And I say this as someone who is due for a colonoscopy, and I have been avoiding it, but I'm gonna do it. So, so, um, so that's the first thing. Um, I don't know a lot about all types of cancer, so I'll talk about breast cancer and say it's not like what you see on TV. Our image of cancer is kind of shaped by this idea of like people getting completely wasted looking, throwing up all the time from the chemo, etc. And it's not like that for most people anymore. They have very good anti-nausea meds for the chemo. I was really scared that I hate throwing up, hate it. And I was really worried about that. The meds just worked. So, like I was a little queasy, like, when I was pregnant, I would wake up and be a little queasy, and you'd have to eat some crackers until your stomach settled, right? It was like that. And they do kind of like put your body through the ringer, because they're trying to make sure they get every little bit of it. I had chemo and surgery and radiation. It was a year of treatment. And they really kind of give you as much chemo as your body can take, generally, right? Like, so they keep giving you chemo until your white blood cells are all gone. And so the last couple of weeks of chemo, I spent mostly asleep on the couch. But I think when people hear cancer, I have students who've said, like, I have my mother and aunt and grandmother all had cancer, and I'm so scared, I don't want to know if I have it. And that's just the wrong approach, right? Like, not knowing is not going to help you, right? And I think it's a very human thing to not want to look at the scary thing, but your best chance is going to be to look at it head on, talk to the doctors, follow their advice. I talked to a nurse, and she was telling me that, we were talking about rates of, survival with breast cancer, and she said, it's generally even better than they tell you if you follow the directions, right? If you do what you're supposed to. The problem is that people have challenges that make it hard for them to follow the directions, whether it's, personal, emotional stuff that's making it tough for them to get themselves to go and get the chemo or whatever it is. I was talking to one nurse told me that she had a patient who was supposed to be coming in for chemo, and she kept missing appointments. And it was because her daughter had a young child, and when her daughter didn't have childcare, the grandmother would have to watch the kid, and so she would miss her chemo appointments. And it was so sad. And I was like, this is a terrible thing in our society that she has to make this choice, right? That because if the end result is, that 2 years from now the kid doesn't have that grandmother anymore, that's such a tremendous loss, right? Yeah. So, there's actually a organization, I'm going to forget the name. There's an organization here in Chicago that looks at cancer survival rates for the Black community, and specifically, Black women have much worse survival rates for breast cancer. And that is, for the most part, due to these larger economic issues. And so they try to help with that and make progress on it. I will look it up, and I can send it to you guys so you can put it in the show notes. But I would say if you get cancer, there's a lot of support out there. Look for that support. There are organizations that will do rides to your chemo if you can't afford to take an Uber there. There's organizations that will come clean your house if you are too tired to clean your house while you're going through treatment. But mostly if they catch breast cancer early, their survival rates are very good. And I don't think that word has gotten out as much as it could have. So tell your friends, get your mammograms, and then do what the doctors say, and odds are you'll be fine. When I was first diagnosed, someone told me, who had been through it, they're like, it's really more like having a bad flu for a year. And I didn't believe them, but that's exactly what it was like. I mean, there were days when you felt sucky, and there were other days when it was fine. I only missed 4 days of teaching. I found it easiest to just keep trying to live my life um, around all the medical stuff. So yeah.
Very interesting. Miss Maharaj, we are getting to the top of the hour. In addition to your academic accomplishments, you have made significant contributions to literature and the arts. You founded Speculative Literature Foundation and the biannual Creative Festival, celebrating South Asia and diaspora literature. Your writing often delves into cultural identity and is positively passionate sexuality activist. Tell our listeners where they can find your material, where they can find you online, where they can interact with you.
Okay, so interacting with me, I mostly live on Facebook. So come find me on Facebook and chat with me there. That's probably easiest. Everything I post on Facebook is public. So yeah, I'm talking to my readers as well as my friends. So I may be getting close to my friend limit. So you can just follow me. It'll be the same content.
Very interesting. Talk to us about your work, the book Tornado.
I am really incredibly busy. I'm sorry. And I will be for at least another year. I'm raising two kids. I have my professor job where I teach during the semesters and I try to write over the summer. I have a small business where I make art and sell it at a little shop in Berwyn near me. And I run my nonprofit, and I'm also serving on school board. And school board meetings are every other week. And, it's a good week if the meeting is 3 hours. Sometimes they're 5 or 6 hours. So they start at 6:30 and sometimes go past midnight. So all of that means if you email me, I may not have time to respond. You can certainly try, and I try to respond, but I get so much email, it's just a little beyond me. I'm hoping that'll be better. I've got one more year on school board, so check back in a year, and I might have some more time. Other than that, I think if you're in science fiction and fantasy, I go to conventions. I'll be at World Fantasy in Niagara Falls in October. So please come up and say hi to me if you're there. I go to the Chicago cons. I'll be at WindyCon. And then other than that, I guess read my books. There's lots of my stories for free on my website. Libraries can get my books. I don't need you to pay for them. It's fine with me. Libraries are awesome and I love them. If you want to buy them, that's also great. Tell your friends. If you want to review them, reviews are super valuable and I would really appreciate it. So even like posting a line or two on Facebook is not on Facebook, on Amazon is incredibly helpful, because once you get a certain number of reviews, Amazon boosts the visibility of your book. So this goes back to that discoverability process. So yeah, I do a lot of community events in the Chicago area. So if you see me at one of them, please feel free to come up and say hi.
Of course, that would be great. Thank you so much for making the time for us. From my team and myself, I want to say thank you so much. And we're looking forward to having conversations with you in the near future.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Thank you so very much, Mr. Marianne. Bye bye.